The act of improvisation is perhaps the culmination of musical skill and development, and it's something that many musicians strive towards. To be able to improvise freely was certainly my goal as I was developing and coming up, and something that I've tried to pass on to my students as well. As a drummer myself, and upon teaching this subsequently to my own students, I have experienced firsthand the difficulty of learning to improvise, both from a technical perspective and from a conceptual understanding perspective. It is very difficult to understand what happens improvisationally on a conceptual level, and it's difficult to practice as well because of its very nature. So in this video, I'm going to share my thoughts and concepts and approaches to improvisation and try and give some insight as to how I approached it, how I teach it, and how I think we can develop it as musicians. I want to just begin with a simple disclaimer. There is no magic bullet. There is no single thing that I can show you or anyone else can show you that will magically make you a good improviser. Like with anything to do with musical development, it takes time, it takes dedication, it takes experience. And that experience is something that is hard to come by. It's something that we all seek out all the time, but it's not something we can just click our fingers. You can watch one video on YouTube and suddenly magically be an incredible improviser. So do keep that in mind. I can only share some ideas and concepts with you. The two things I'm going to discuss today comprise the two main aspects required for improvisation as I see it. The first of those is a deep knowledge of rhythmic vocabulary, rhythmic ideas. And the second of those is a deep technical vocabulary that allows us to express those ideas. So on the one hand, we have the rhythms and the ideas themselves. And on the other, we have the tools and the ability to actually express those ideas. One without the other is kind of functionally useless. If we have all the chops, all the technical ability, but no ideas, it's useless. If we have all the rhythmic ideas, but no means with which to express them, again, it's useless. So our goal is to develop both of these simultaneously in parallel so that they join together and we are able to express musical ideas freely and musically. So let's explore both of these concepts in turn and see what I'm really getting at here. The first of those, our rhythmic knowledge, our knowledge of musical ideas and our experience of music generally, is something that is very difficult to practice in isolation. It comes from years of listening to different types of music, years of listening to other musicians, and years of practicing in a certain way. Now, we can all listen more, we can all try and gain experience on that front. What does it mean to practice in a certain way? Well, first of all, we need to make sure we are studying rhythmic ideas, musical styles, in a really deep and holistic way. So to demonstrate this in a rather simplistic way, I'm going to begin with a simple clave rhythm. A clave is quite appropriate because it is a simple, recognizable, ubiquitous rhythm that can form the basis of a lot of broader musical ideas. For those of you that aren't familiar, a clave simply sounds like this. So simple rhythm, I'm feeling it as 16th notes in a bar of 4/4, 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a. This is going to form the germ, if you like, of our musical theme that we are going to develop. Now, the first thing it's always a good idea to do is to take the rhythm you are practicing and voice it against the quarter note. We need to understand fully where the rhythm sits against the beat. Now, for our current purposes, this is a quarter note. Sometimes it might be a dotted quarter note or something else. But whatever the rhythmic idea is, we need to be able to voice it against the quarter note. So to do this, I'm simply going to keep time on the quarter note with my left foot hi-hat. And against this, I'm simply going to voice the clave around the drums. I'm not going to use any particular sticking. I'm not going to use any rudiments or techniques or vocabulary. I'm simply going to play that clave and explore moving it around the different voices on the kit, all the while keeping time with that hi-hat. So I'm achieving two things here. I'm increasing my familiarity with the clave itself, and I'm solidifying my knowledge of that rhythm against the quarter note pulse. And of course, I'm increasing a bit of coordination as well, playing one thing here and a different thing here. Hopefully you can hear that simple clave rhythm being voiced against that hi-hat, and I'm just exploring some simple orchestration options. Now we're going to step it up a little bit, and I'm going to start actually thinking in terms of musical ideas. So I'm trying desperately not to play randomly now. We're trying to actually play with some intent. We are trying to intentionally voice a specific idea. And at this stage, this might just take the form of a simple melody. So I will try and make it very, very obvious, and you will hear how I'm developing a simple rhythmic phrase. Now, I was working with a lot of question and answer there. I was introducing a phrase and then modifying or answering that phrase. And again, this is something that comes down to musical experience, knowledge of music generally beyond just the sense of drums, knowing how to consider arrangement, musical structure, musical form. And again, this is not something that can simply be practiced in isolation, but it is all part and parcel of it. Now, what we are doing here is starting to explore thinking in terms of the phrasing using our ears. Notice I was not thinking about the sticking at all. I wasn't thinking about rights and left hands. Are these doubles? Are these singles? Doesn't matter. What matters is the musical phrase that I am exploring. Now we can take it a step further, and we can start expanding away from the clave rhythm itself. Rather than sticking rigidly to just those 5 notes, we can start to lengthen it, shorten it, vary the rhythms in between, and start to add in a little bit of flavor, again, solely to do with the musical phrasing. I'm not thinking in terms of paradiddles. I'm not thinking in terms of double strokes. I'm just thinking in terms of what can I do with that clave rhythm. If we imagine it like a ball of Play-Doh, we can stretch it, crush it, roll it, whatever else. We're manipulating that fundamental idea. And you can see there we can start to take it a few steps further. I'm not going to get ahead of myself just yet, but essentially all I'm doing is exploring this clave phrase, different orchestrations, add a note here, remove a note there, fill in some gaps, which I will come to shortly. But again, this is just familiarizing myself with what I can do with that basic rhythm, strictly to do with the rhythmic phrase. Now, turning to something to do with the drums specifically, we can explore taking that same rhythm and voicing it in a particular style. Maybe we can conceive of that clave rhythm as a funk rock groove, for example. And I'm following the same principle there. I'm voicing the main notes of the clave, the main emphasis points of that clave between the bass drum and snare drum against an underlying 8th note hi-hat pulse. I can do the same thing over here. And you can quite clearly hear and see how that idea can be developed. I was adding in the occasional bass drum. I was adding in some ghost notes. I was adding in some bell strokes. I will come to that again shortly because that kind of is involved in the second concept. But you can hopefully see what I'm getting at here. I'm starting with that basic clave and I'm exploring what I can do with it within the language of drumming. Now, this may seem like a bit of a vacuous step, but I can't overstate its importance. If you don't have a thorough understanding and a deep familiarity with the rhythmic idea you are trying to play, you won't have any content with which to actually improvise. So when I have students say to me, when I ask them to improvise, I don't know what to play, it's because they don't have that deep familiarity with a particular idea. Okay, it's like asking them to do a freestyle rap in French. Well, if you don't know any French, you're not going to be able to do a freestyle rap. You have to develop the vocabulary and the knowledge of the language first. Now, one of the big problems I face with students is that I will give them a rhythmic idea to play, and within seconds, they have forgotten it. So I will give them something like the clave or something even more simple comprising eighth notes and quarter notes. And again, I can show it to them, and before they've even played it back to me, they're asking to hear it again. And again, they forget it. This is not a deficiency on their part. This is just inexperience. When you work with rhythm all the time, you become very, very adept. You become fluent in that language. So in working with rhythm, whether it's listening to music and playing along to different music, different songs, learning different styles, actually practicing rhythm, going out of your way to learn different parts of the repertoire, however you choose to do it, actually actively working with rhythmic vocabulary on a regular basis is going to improve your general sense, your general fluency with rhythm. And that's really, really important. You can't improvise without that. So my students sitting there very frustrated because they might have a ton of technical ability, but they simply don't have the experience with rhythmic ideas generally to provide content for their improvisation. Now, we'll return to this shortly. Let's explore the second idea now, which is the slightly more technically minded. And that is the application of specific pieces of vocabulary on a technical sense. What do I mean? Well, vocabulary in this sense are the actual things that you know how to do on the drums with a pair of sticks. So we take something really simple, like a groove over here on the ride cymbal. Now, your vocabulary in this context might include something really, really simple, like bass drum placement. Your vocabulary describes the pool of bass drum ideas that you are able to call upon to decorate this groove. So now, just for a minute or so, I'm going to improvise over here on the ride cymbal, solely utilizing some simple bass drum vocabulary. Everything I just played is part of my vocabulary. Now, if you're sitting there watching that and listening to that thinking, God, I couldn't do that, ask yourself, is it because you couldn't technically play the bass drum in that way, or is it because you are simply unfamiliar with the ideas? Take this one, for example. There is a difference between being technically capable of playing that and actually having that particular idea. If you've simply never experienced or encountered that sort of rhythm or groove before, how are you going to be expected to play it, even if you are capable? So this is what I mean, exploring different styles, exploring different pieces of music, and crucially, developing your own technical vocabulary so that you know how to apply the technique you actually have. Another example might be to do with the vocabulary we use on our right hand. It's slightly off shot on the camera there, but I've got a ride bell separated from the ride itself. Now, there's a great deal we can do to decorate and add flavor to our grooves simply by utilizing that bell in interesting ways. So something like this. Now, all of the phrasing I was using there is my vocabulary. It is the things I know how to do regarding the ride bell. Now, you started to hear there some ghost notes creeping in. That also counts. And maybe something like this. Now, that's just a paradiddle, essentially. That is paradiddle sticking, but being applied in a certain way, utilizing the ride bell, utilizing ghost notes, utilizing some different bass drum placements. So we can break that right down. We can conceptualize the basic idea as this. It's just a simple groove between the bass drum, snare drum and hi-hat, and the hands are playing a paradiddle. But of course, we are not just playing a paradiddle. We're playing accents and ghost notes. If I didn't do that, we would just have this. Far less refined, far less musical. So by learning the paradiddle in this particular context, I'm thinking, oh, actually, I need some ghost notes in there. I need some dynamic contrast, so we have something more. We can also play with accents on the hi-hat. Bass drum placements start to creep in now. So by combining these three things, the ghost notes, the accents, and the bass drum placement, the dynamic contrast and a bit of rhythmic phrasing, our simple paradiddle has been expanded into something much more. And again, this all serves to expand my improvisational vocabulary. And then you start to combine that with some other applications of the paradiddle you may know. For instance, you may have studied a paradiddle in such a way that you take the right hand around the drums as an accent and the left hand stays as a ghost note on the snare drum. Still a simple paradiddle, but we've studied it and applied it in a certain way. So now what happens if we combine these two ideas? We've got the vocabulary that comprises this paradiddle-based groove with the accents and the ghost notes and the bass drum, and we've got this application that takes it around the drums in a certain sort of fill sense. We can combine these things and see what happens. And when I move over here, I'm simply applying the same idea, but every right-handed accent becomes a bell. And you can hear how quite quickly, by the application of a few simple ideas, we have developed a really nice improvisational vocabulary where I'm just applying it. I'm just following it in a certain way. Now, this is where the two concepts have to work together. We can't simply rely on playing paradiddles all the time because we are just regurgitating a pattern. So what we need to do, and this is the culmination of it, is apply that approach to technical vocabulary and combine it with the rhythmic knowledge we have, our underlying rhythmic idea. So we started with a clave earlier. Let's see what we can start to do now where these two concepts work together. So in terms of the content of what I'm actually playing, I'm voicing the clave in a certain way. In terms of the technique and the phrases and the sticking I'm using, I'm calling on my pool of vocabulary, such as that I just demonstrated, the paradiddles, the use of the bell, the bass drum placements, the ghost notes, and the general orchestration in different contexts. And we can start to put it all together to create a comprehensive improvisation that is both musically coherent and technically refined. Now, this is the difficulty of improvisation generally. It is very, very difficult, perhaps impossible, for me to clearly describe how everything I just played links back to the clave. That is something that is so intuitive to me and my own grasp of the clave and my own particular application of vocabularic technique, which is peculiar to me, that it wouldn't really make sense anyway. My point is, in order to start to attain that level of confidence, you have to explore both of these areas together. You have to have a deep knowledge of the rhythmic idea you are trying to play, to express, and you have to have a deep pool of technical vocabulary in order to express those ideas. So I could go on, I could demonstrate all sorts of applications and technical vocabulary and things like that, but that's not the point of this video. I've done that in other videos. The point is, you need to understand clearly the two elements you need in order to work together and to create the sense of improvisation. So the question then becomes, what can you practically do today in your next practice session to actually achieve this? Well, first of all, clearly define to yourself those two concepts you need to work on. You need to improve your general sense of rhythm, your general understanding of musical form and structure, your general familiarity with the rhythmic ideas you want to express. Now, on that note, however good I may or may not be on the drums, if I am unfamiliar with a rhythmic style, a rhythmic idea, I'm not going to be able to improvise with it. You ask me to improvise in a really authentic samba or songo style or a mambo style, and I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to be able to do anything beyond those basic few rhythms and patterns that I know. Not because I'm a bad drummer, but because I'm not versed in that style of music. I don't understand the rhythms to a deep level. I don't have a deep pool of knowledge of that style. Within the sort of funk, fusion and jazz idioms, I've got a much deeper knowledge. I've got a much more familiar sense of the rhythms, the style, how those musical ideas are expressed, that I'm going to have a much better chance of performing something nice and musical. So your knowledge of styles is very, very important. Explore rhythm, study rhythm, practice certain polyrhythms, practice different time signatures. Actually take a set rhythm like a clave and stay with it for a long time. How can I voice this clave? How can I vary it? How can I stretch it and compress it and make it go over the bar line? How can I conceptualize of that clave in a certain way? What's the time signature? Where's the pulse? What's the note value I'm using? What's the subdivision we're sitting on? This is all part of your actual academic study of the instrument. You're trying to clarify your knowledge of rhythm, deepen your knowledge of the rhythm, and crucially, the particular styles and idioms in which you want to improvise. And then secondly, we need to address that second concept of developing our actual improvisational vocabulary itself. Now, my intention with this video was not to demonstrate specific improvisational vocabulary. I've already touched on it a little bit. One example, which I feel is a very, very powerful concept, is simply an accent approach. And this is where you take an accent figure and you learn different ways to apply that accent figure. This is nothing new. This is not original to me. A simple idea would be to play the clave as accented 16th notes. So you start with the clave, and then you fill in the gaps with unaccented strokes. Those accents can then be voiced around the drums. And you can see I'm applying that same sort of rhythmic concept of playing with the melody and sort of orchestration exploration, but with a particular vocabularic concept in mind. In this case, I'm playing single stroke accents. You can do the same thing using double strokes in between. You can change the sticking. There's a million and one different things you can do, but in order to actually practice this, you need to actually go out and discover that particular vocabulary. And this is where the method books and the teachers and your own exploration come in. I worked a lot with Gary Chaffee's material for some vocabulary. That really opened my mind to do with the sticking. And these days I work on my own material. The Alan Dawson complete drummer's vocabulary on ways you can apply a rhythmic figure from like syncopation. That's a really common way to do this. The whole idea, if we have already addressed the content of what you're going to play, you now have to address the tools with which you're going to actually play it. So you need to develop the vocabulary. This is another place where my students often get stuck. Even if they are familiar with a particular rhythm, they lack the tools to express them in any interesting ways. They may start with a clave in this way. But maybe they don't know enough about sticking or paradiddles or diddle strokes or flams or drags to be able to do much more than that on a technical sense. So this is what I said at the beginning. We need both of these concepts to be developed in parallel. So I hope that has given you something to think about with regards to your improvisation. Improvisation is not a dark art. It is not a mystical art. It is not magic, but it is something that is the culmination of two parallel parts of a musical journey. Your musical knowledge, your experience, your stylistic knowledge, your ability to hear, retain, and manipulate a rhythm, and also the culmination of your technical prowess, what you are physically capable of doing with a pair of sticks, your knowledge of rudimental applications, your knowledge of sticking concepts, your knowledge of flams and drags and the different decorations, your vocabularic knowledge of, actually, I didn't know I could do that. And that's a really powerful thing. So conceptually, improvisation is the pinnacle of both of those things working together. I hope this has given you a few ideas to go out and expand your own practice and expand your own thought processes on this. As I said at the very beginning, there is no single thing that I can tell you that is going to magically make you a better improviser. However, if you understand the two parallel paths before you, you will hopefully have a better chance of arriving at that destination. So I wish you the best of luck. Work hard, deepen your knowledge of rhythm, deepen your knowledge of musical style, deepen your experience with musical application generally, and keep working on specific solo vocabulary, improvisational vocabulary. Don't just learn patterns, don't just learn set fills, learn concept. How can I take a paradiddle and expand it into an entire concept? How can I take accented single strokes and expand it into a complete concept? How can I add linear elements? How can I add flams? How can I add double strokes in between the accent? And deeply study the actual technical vocabulary itself. So you've got the content and you've got the tools. Thank you very much for watching. Best of luck, and I'll see you on the next one.